Hi there, it's Philip Heitzen here, the founder of Art of Procurement. If you're a regular listener, you'll no doubt have noticed that we've been adding new types of shows into the Art of Procurement podcast feed. Our goal is to share stories and insights with you from across the world of procurement, using a variety of formats and, increasingly, additional hosts. And so today, we publish Procurement for the People, a new monthly podcast with host Katherine McCleery. I hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Procurement for the People. I'm your host, Katherine McCleery. I mentioned at the end of my last episode that this episode you're about to listen to was actually my favorite to date, and it's true. Today's guest is Jason Roberts. He's the founder and CEO of Kaleida, a supplier diversity platform. But he didn't come on the show just to talk about that. Instead, he shared his own personal stories of facing bias, racism, and how each of those tough moments shaped who he is now and his mission for an equitable and inclusive future. There's just too much in this episode to miss. Give it a listen. Let me know if this one made as big of an impact for you as it did for me. Hope you all enjoy. Jason, it's so good to have you on the show. Welcome.
Katherine, thanks so much for the invitation. It's been a great opportunity to sit here and speak with you today.
It's a great way for me to start my Friday, I have to say. Speaking with you on the topics that we're going to cover today are very timely, very important for procurement, and I cannot wait to dig in with you.
Yeah, well, just as you're starting your day, I'll finish with mine, but it means I've got some stories about the week, some of the progress from the week. So, lots to talk about.
Can you give our listeners just a little context into who you are, what you've done, and how you've come to found Kaleida?
Yeah, sure. So, as I said, I'm a 42-year-old father of two. I've got two daughters now. One's just about to go off to university later this year, and an 11-year-old. And I spent 23 years or so working within financial services. Now, that was 11 years within investment banks. And that's where I really learned a lot about technology and how to piece together technologies and run projects. And then about 12, 13 years actually selling technology back to banks and asset managers and hedge funds. And so that's where I had basically learned how to sell. Prior to that, my mother is from the Caribbean, from Jamaica. She came over when she was maybe got 7 years old or so, 8 years old, and built a career up in working actually within the canteens of a number of organizations, large organizations. And funnily enough, I was about 15 years old, maybe 15 years old, where I was looking for a little bit of a part-time job in the summer. My mother worked in a bank called Industrial Bank of Japan, and she asked them if they had a summertime job for me just after I left secondary school. Secondary school, and was about to hit college. Now, college for us in the UK is 16 to 18. Just put it into context. And,
okay.
Yeah, and so what was interesting was they had a job working as a messenger, which is where you walk around the offices of the bank and you just hand out letters, right, and change the water bottles, etc. But it gave me access to that financial world, to the banks. It gave me access to the corporate world, so to speak. And just last year during lockdown, I went for a walk in a park, and my mum was quite upset because she said, "Look, Jay, I've never given you anything of real value, right? She hasn't got an inheritance to offer me or anything like that." And I said, "Mum, actual fact, everything that I am today is because of how you've raised me, whether it be challenges or lessons." Right, I am who I am because of where you led me and how I got through the challenges I had to overcome as a young man. So, long story short, she got me this job, and they liked my attitude so much that they called me back again each summer for the 2 years, plus the Christmas period as well. So I was able to earn a few pennies, just to kind of put some money in a 16-year-old, 17-year-old's pocket, right, for his McDonald's and his pair of trainings that he needed. But what they liked about my ethic was interesting. Actually, let me roll back 1 second. There was a point during my college years when I actually also cleaned the offices. Okay, so this wasn't during the summer period where I was there doing the messengering, but let's say for a period of 3 or 4 months, no pride at all, right? Sometimes pride can be a downfall. I actually was on site as a cleaner in the morning from 6 a.m. until 8 a.m., 2 hours a morning, every morning for about 3 months. What was ironic was the same people who were my colleagues when I was there in the summer, I was then subservient to them, cleaning their offices, picking up their dirty mugs. And it really kind of humbled me to do that role, but to want to do more and be more, to live the lives and have someone clean my dirty mug and work as part of the team to help support the offices. So I think some of the things that drive you are your experiences. So now when we fast forward, after the 2 years of working there within the summer as a messenger and having done a stint of actually cleaning the offices as well, I'd finished my college course where I'd done business and finance for 2 years, and mum couldn't afford university for me, and that's what I needed financial support. So as a single mother in South London in a council estate, I took the hit and said, okay, we can't afford university for me. In actual fact, I'm not necessarily really extremely academic as well. So it kind of worked for me to go and get more practical light experience in work. And they offered me a job because they liked my attitude and my work ethic, a full-time job as an accounts payable analyst. And so they offered me £10,500 as my very first job back in 1997. It would have been doing accounts payable, and that ultimately was where my career began in investment banking. And that led me eventually to joining a company called JP Morgan, the largest investment bank in the world, where at the age of 24, maybe 25, I actually ran a global team. And this is just a poor black guy from Brixton with no tertiary education, with no claim to fame, nothing special, just a really strong work ethic, but had an opportunity and made the most of it. And suddenly I'm running a team of 8 people. There was 2 people in London, 1 in Glasgow, 2 in New York, and 2 in Mumbai, 2 or 3 in Mumbai, I think it was, reporting into me in JP Morgan, this young man trying to make a way for himself. And that's where my experience came, should I say, and my entrance point into the market.
So you overcame so much, and your work ethic pushed you, and you were able to achieve so much, that sounds like such an incredible success story, and there's no doubt that it is. But tell me about some of the rougher context of your work experience that has led you to now being the founder of a supplier diversity platform.
Yeah, it's a really good, interesting conversation, this top part of the topic, actually, because so I worked for, I think, maybe 5 investment banks over 11 years. I won't say which one it was, but there was 2 situations in 2 separate banks, okay? One situation occurred, I'll say the one that happened first. I was sat in my desk. I used to go to church. I had a really bad church suit. It didn't fit properly. I had no money, right? I was sat in my in the office working. So this was like a shared office, a shared desk. And out of nowhere, this lady looked up. She was my colleague and sat pretty much adjacent to me. And she said, "Jason, do you know what you look like?" Now, bear in mind, imagine silence. All you can hear is the keyboard going, rattling on, okay, and the scuff of your shirt scratching against the table. And what she said was, "Jason, you know what you look like? You look like the kind of person who would stand in a subway with a hood on and mug people."
Oh my God.
I took a breath, didn't know how to respond, so reported it to my manager, who was a black lady, and said, "This is what this individual just said." And the manager then pulled her aside with me as well and kind of reprimanded her in the conversation to understand what she said and why she meant that. She apologized profusely. I didn't mean anything by it, but it began to open the door to what prejudice and discrimination and racism can actually look like in an office environment. Okay. The second situation happened where I was actually, again, I won't give too much detail, but I went to help a member of staff at their desk. The member of staff was doing something wrong in this computer system that we were using, and it got a bit tense, where the individual stood up towards me when I said, "Look, this is how you're breaking the machine, but if you continue to do it this way, you will solve the problem. If you go this way, then you'll continue to break it. Let's go, the way to solve the problem." Anyway, my manager called me to his office and said, "Hey, Jason," and we sat down. He said, "Next time you go to someone's desk, it's probably best to stoop down." Right? He said, standing over them can be, you're tall. He said, "Look, remember, you're a big guy. You're a big black guy." And those words will never leave me, because it basically began to make me understand what people saw, right? And And those are the kind of prejudices and discriminations and stereotypes that a lot of the diverse community experience, whether you be LGBTQ, whether you be a female founder, whether you be disabled, or even a veteran, right? A veteran can go into an office environment and people are thinking negative, stereotypical stuff, right? Does this person have PTSD? And those become traumatic experiences that can shape your life. They can either make you want to do better and fight for success, or it can make you fold. So those experiences, I think when I think back, they gave me an insight into what my life would be like in an environment where people don't really get to see Black people in the office. Another very quick example is in those similar years, before I got engaged, I went to Egypt to do my PADI scuba diving license. And I went by myself. I was working out if I should propose to my girlfriend at the time. And a couple called me over to sit with them. You know, you sit down on a resort and there's like a ease and entertainment, and so this couple called me over and said, "Hey, come and sit with us. We can have a chat." And it was very, very nice and comfortable conversation. The woman asked me if my blood was red. Now,
What?
Yeah, she asked if my blood was red. The point I want to make really to your listeners is that society has changed somewhat, where people have now a lot more exposure to and access to different types of people from different communities. But there was a time when there wasn't that access, right? And we're still fighting for access to this day, for equality and equity, and by a route of equity. So a lot of my experience has helped to found the foundations for my organization, where I actually understand what it feels like to be on the wrong end of a prejudicial statement or a stereotypical accusation or comment or conversation. And I wanted to basically build a platform that would bridge the gap between both buyers and suppliers, okay, but particularly those suppliers who are historically underutilized and marginalized business owners. And that's what the Kaleida platform is. It seeks to connect buyers who actually want to spend revenue, spend money with diverse owned businesses, but their challenge is they cannot find those diverse businesses because supplier diversity is founded really in the US over the last 40 years or so, maybe slightly more. But across the UK and Europe and even beyond in Asia and Asia Pacific, supply diversity hasn't got the same traction just yet. There's no legislation really to support it as such just yet. But there's certainly a movement today where firms, these procurement buyers, really want to be able to find diverse suppliers and award them based on quality, not just on the fact that they are diverse. And so with the Kaleida platform, we help buying organizations find or identify and assess diverse suppliers that they can invite to participate in the tender, irrespective of the diversity. So we are a fully inclusive platform stroke marketplace.
I love that. And you touched on the quality versus just, diverse certification. So that seems like a common misconception that people in general, and specifically our audience, buyers and people in procurement, may think that they're having to give up quality in order to choose a diverse supplier. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is certainly not an attack on the white cisgendered male, right? Who's 40 years old and got silver hair. And unfortunately,
Oh my God, no.
that can sometimes come across that way because of the narrative that's pushed, or the fact that it's quite in vogue at the moment. If you think about it another way, in terms of numbers, right? Organizations are setting aside between 3 to 5, maybe 8% of their annual spend to try to spend with diverse suppliers. So is there equality? Yes, because now you have an opportunity to go for to participate in these tenders and win the revenue. That's the great thing. Is there equity? Not just yet, but that's the route. That's how we'll get there. And so what's been powerful is that the organization themselves have set aside this amount of spend to spend with diverse suppliers. And what it does is it actually then trickles down through the supply chain, through the value chain, to help these diverse businesses grow and expand and hire more and add more diversity and inclusion, and then also ultimately inclusivity into the world.
Okay, so for the diverse business owners,
Yes.
the people that would be using your platform, or not, anybody who's
Remember, we're fully inclusive, right? So we're for suppliers and diverse suppliers. We are the only platform actually representing everyone without discrimination.
right. So for the people that are diverse owners, what would you say, what would be your advice to them on how to overcome some of these conscious and unconscious biases, because it can be a major obstacle when you are trying to sell to either procurement or whoever it is at a larger corporation.
Well, look, first of all, I mean, the key thing here, right, is if the companies are doing their part now, which is to
Mm-hmm.
dedicate spend, which is written into their budget, the diverse communities have to throw their hat in the ring as well. We have to participate in tenders. We have to apply. We have to put our best foot forward. We have to go and get trained on how to present better. We have to participate in the tender process. We have to do our part in order to get access to these larger contracts. But to speak about unconscious bias very briefly, as a salesperson, okay, who worked in corporate sales for 13 years, when I walked into a sales room, met by an audience that I was pitching to of mostly white male men, there were not many women in those boardrooms who were holding senior positions as well. I would often walk into, I guess, I'd call it unconscious bias, where I felt, and this could possibly be me, and this is why I take some accountability. I possibly had a chip on my shoulder that because the Evening Standard newspaper last night had a picture of a black person that was, performing some sort of criminal activity, and it was plastered across the news, and we have things like black on black crime and all these things that are buzzwords that kind of create negative stereotype. I would walk into that room and I would feel that there was an unconscious bias, sometimes conscious, but an unconscious bias that I have to overcome. And so, you know, I would sit down in that room and I would have to almost make an excuse to try to justify who I was, to make people feel comfortable with me. So, for example, I walk into the room and I felt that there was something, and I would say, "Oh, it's kind of good to be out of the home now, and left the wife and kids at home." Because what it does, it made me normal to them. Otherwise,
Right.
we are the stereotype, right, of black men leave their kids. We just have children everywhere. We don't get married. All these negative stereotypes that follow us as black people across our social lives and professional lives. I felt that weight. And so I often went to the room trying to dispel that straight away and kind of normalize how I would be perceived. And that's an unfair burden on anyone to have.
Absolutely. You should never have to bear that burden in any room, especially in a boardroom. And I love what you are doing because it eliminates that burden for people that are business owners, who are seeking tenders for diverse spend. And
Yes.
so collectively, I think procurement and people at the corporate level in general, I would hope, are perhaps shifting. I'm hoping that they are trying to shift some of that burden with diverse spend initiatives. At least, that's the goal. And you had mentioned in our previous conversation that there are organizations that are making it a requirement, right, as a certain percentage of their spend. And so what would you say to procurement teams that, and by the way, are your typical stakeholders who are you're trying to work with on the buy side? Is that normally procurement, or are you speaking to C-suite or finance? Who are you normally speaking to?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. Our stakeholders are primarily going to be chief procurement officers, right? They then
Okay.
dedicate maybe some of their team members, people in their team, the senior procurement officers, to help to kick off the project whilst they take care of other types of business. But they will own the project at that executive level. Um, Ironically, what we see happening successfully is that companies are investing heavily into their D&I programs or their EDI programs. Because if you can not necessarily mitigate against, but if you can manage or teach or influence diversity and inclusion within your own four walls as your own corporate operation, when a disabled person goes into the office to sell a product or service, they shouldn't be laughed out of the room or looked at with any raised eyebrows, because disability becomes a normal part of everyday conversation. And so our stakeholders, we get a lot of support working with EDI, or as Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, or D&I professionals who understand the need to expand their own projects. Right, we've got a D&I program running within our offices now that's been going for 2 years. How do we expand that out to our supply chain? So they tend to be really strong supporters of the Kaleida platform and its purpose. But if you look at companies like, they're on record, so Unilever, right? They've committed 2 billion euros per year, okay, for 5 years to spend with diverse suppliers. Now that works out, I think, around about maybe 4% of their annual spend, an incredible amount of money for them. Procter & Gamble, just last year, I think around May time, May or June, raised their commitment from $2 billion to $5 billion. So there's a huge focus on these corporations wanting to do the right thing. They're wanting to do, to make life more equitable. And to do that, they have to increase their accessibility to these diverse suppliers. And they're doing that through platforms like the Kaleida platform. And again, just to be clear, not saying Unilever or Procter & Gamble are our clients of ours, but their story is incredible because they really are setting a trend by building programs internally, ensuring that the teams are resourced to deliver these programs, and actually making the right partnerships to allow them to deliver successfully. It's not just lip service, which is sometimes a fear out there.
Right. So you are speaking to CPOs, and it sounds like some of them are well-versed and have, diverse supplier targets that they want to hit, and they are supportive and effective. What are the conversations like with procurement leaders who maybe have never embarked on a diverse supplier program? How do you speak on your program and the benefits?
It's a really good question. I think what's been encouraging, of last year, I spoke to maybe about 102, maybe 105 companies, right? A number of conversations, a number of presentations. There was one company that said they wouldn't be ready for 2 years because they're actually doing a technology change, a tech stack change. That's a 2-year program, and they can't afford to put any more resources into this just yet. It's not a priority, was the words that was used. Not a problem at all. They understand it's the right thing to do. The question again was?
Yeah, so the question is for procurement organizations that are embarking on a diverse supplier program for the first time, and maybe they don't know why or how. Do you have those conversations that help guide them and potentially helps them deliver better as a procurement team?
Yeah, so there are a couple of steps that we encourage them to take. And the first one really is at the executive level. They need to get senior management buy-off for 2 reasons. When they can agree, if they do agree to a certain amount of spend, they want to communicate that spend amount publicly. And if they communicate that publicly, they put themselves in the crosshairs of the public, the praying public. Okay, so they want to be able to deliver on whatever goals that they set. If you don't have executive management sign off, then you won't really have a project that you can deliver on because management aren't behind it. Ironically, and I received an email just this morning. I won't say who it's from, but they are a top 10 insurance organization in the world. And they said, "Hi, Jason, we're just looking at creating or adding into policy a section on supply diversity." That's how you make a change. It's got to become part of your company policy. If it's just given lip service, if there's no real commitment to it, if they want to kind of greenwash the whole supply diversity program, then you won't really achieve anything. And frankly, as an organization, we are prepared to walk away from corporates who don't really have the tools or capability, or maybe the real interest at this point in time to deliver on a strong supply diversity program, because it wastes everyone's time. We lose credibility from our supplying audience, and it just doesn't send out the right message. So, really the critical message really is to get senior management, executive level buy-in, okay? Because that will ultimately make its way into your annual reports. When the company reports annually their performance, they will say we had we spent 6 million with diverse suppliers who were certified, and 1 million with diverse suppliers who were uncertified, but they are self-certified. Sorry. So these things are very important to delivering a strong program. Making sure they have the right partnerships internally, that they have the right partnerships externally in terms of technology and services that can help them find and identify diverse suppliers. So those are kind of really three things. The whole thing around agreeing to a certain amount of spend isn't necessarily required as such, in my opinion, as long as a public statement is made that they are committing to being more accessible to diverse suppliers. So that communication part is key.
I love that. Thank you for laying out those three pieces of very impactful advice for procurement teams. I know our listeners are going to really get a great bit of value out of that. As I've seen so many people taking on these projects that don't know where to begin. So appreciate your thoughts there. And for anybody that has, been curious through this conversation about Kaleida and what's going on with your business, I want to give you the chance to speak on what you've got planned for 2022. You want to tell us where Kaleida is going, if you can, and just some fun stuff that you've got planned this year.
Well, look. So the great thing is, when we looked at what we do as an organization, we had to look at what the challenges are that procurement organizations are facing. Okay, there are 5 key problems that they experience. The first one is finding diverse suppliers. They don't know where to look to find diverse suppliers. The second issue that they encounter is agreeing to a spend, right? Then they want to try to find the tools to support that program. They need to find data in one centralized place because the teams aren't resourced the way that can be deliver a supply diversity program efficiently and effectively. Those 5 problems are what we solve for. So this year, what's great about the Kaleida platform and what we're actually really going to be what we're pioneering and doing is we have all diverse suppliers all in one centralized place. So if you imagine this, okay, you want to work with a diverse organization, or you have a tender for £50,000. Typically today, companies have to either join up with advocacy groups or NGO organizations, and that to find these diverse suppliers, right? And that can be quite time consuming. If you want to spend $1 billion this year, and you've got kind of like in the tailspin that £50,000 kind of level contract, it's a lot of $50,000 contracts you've got to split between $1 billion to get your $1 billion spend. And it's when you have to do it each time and send out tenders to each of these organizations each time, it just takes too long, and it will be very difficult for them to achieve their goals. So what's been great about the Kaleida platform this year, we are launching the platform across the UK, throughout the UK, and the European Union as well, and then pursuing the Asia Pacific region as well. So EMEA, the UK plus EMEA, the UK, 7 European countries, then EMEA, then the Asia Pac as well. And we should be able to achieve that in the next 18 months. And it just means that when a firm wants to deliver a supply diversity program, irrespective of location or territory or region, they have a technology partner that has all diverse suppliers, irrespective of diversity, in one centralized golden source of data. And that's going to really cut down the time with which it takes to find a company. We can find you a diverse, assuming the database is, let's say in the UK right now, we can find you women-owned, minority-owned, or Black-owned, Asian-owned, disabled-owned, veteran-owned, all these different communities in less than half a second for those who provide, let's say, a marketing service. So being able to find those diverse suppliers in one place in a matter of seconds is going to really help to empower their achievements. And for us, as we grow across the regions, as we push eastwards, allow them to deliver their programs, their supply diversity programs in multiple locations in one centralized system. We're looking to grow our team as well, which is going to be great to finally begin to really hire some real good, strong talent. We're looking for direction as well. So I'm going to be expanding our non-executive leadership team to kind of put some more strategic steer on the business as well. And we're also been approaching a few organizations about some funding to help really kind of ensure that we achieve all of our targets over the next 6 years.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, a lot
All of
happening.
that, just all of that, the growth, the expansion, and being able to hire on more people to come alongside and achieve what your vision is with Kaleida.
Yeah. Look,
I'm so
Catherine,
excited for
sorry,
you.
that's the key part, right? I'm looking forward to finding individuals who actually understand the journey, but who are passionate about being part, not just of a technology startup organization, but truly making a difference. Look, this company that I got this email from just this morning at 7:53, I don't know what their spend will be, right? Hypothetically, let's just say it's $10 million. That's $10 million more available now to diverse suppliers that was never there before. That's going to make a huge difference to people, to small businesses, to their families, to where their children go to school. All the things that are impacted by struggling businesses who can't find a deal, who can't land these big fishes, who can't sign these big contracts. It impacts someone at the end of it. It impacts their families. It impacts where they go on holiday. Imagine now that part of what we're doing by making them more accessible to these big corporates actually will have a fundamental impact in their children's lives, but also where they buy from. Who are they going and buying from now? They probably buy from their local community. And that again kind of creates, wealth to some degree, at least revenue generation across those local communities as well. So we're really pleased to be really leading the exclusive is not inclusive mantra and really pushing inclusivity through our platform.
I love your vision, and I love that it's much more, it's much bigger than what we see in front of us every day as sales targets or revenue growth. It really is about changing people's minds, changing perspectives, changing habits, and improving the overall corporate success. Like I think that's also the bottom line here, is that on the procurement side and corporate organizational side, diverse spend improves their bottom line as well on a multitude of levels, and the impact that you're making, I can see will be a snowball effect.
Yeah. You know what? Let me add something to that as well, because I think this is a really important point to your listeners, particularly the procurement professionals. One thing to be very careful of, and last year I held a number of webinars with different communities, the neurodiverse community, LGBTQ+, women-owned businesses, minority, black-owned businesses. Sorry, I don't like the word minority, so I use the word black-owned business or Asian-owned.
Sure.
And one of the things that everyone said is, don't choose me to do a certain job because you think I can do it because of my diversity, because of my noun, right? People who are neurodiverse, who may be autistic, they don't always make great mathematicians. So don't offer them just mathematics style projects or revenue business opportunities, right? Women don't just do creativity and marketing. They can be fantastic scientists as well. So one of the things that I've been really pushing through the conversation I'm having with these procurement professionals is, don't try to pigeonhole anyone by the tender. If you have a tender for 50 grand, put it out there and see what comes back. As opposed to, this one's for marketing, let's go to the women. This one's for legal, let's go to the LGBTQ community. Don't pigeonhole anyone.
Yep.
And that message was really pushed by the chap who runs, who actually is a neurodiverse individual and runs his business as a neurodiverse owned business. And it was just fascinating to kind of hear that, because, black people, we're not just security guards and caterers, or, we can do a lot more as well. So to pigeonhole actually creates discrimination again. And so we have to be very careful. And this is why, again, sorry, just to push the point, this is why the Kaleida platform is so powerful, because you don't have to think who can do this. You put it out there to who, and whoever responds becomes your the prospect list that you may want to survey and assess. So that's a very important message to put through to your procurement professionals that are listening today.
Believe me, we're going to highlight that for sure. That's going in the highlight reel.
Yeah.
We'll absolutely double underline that. I appreciate you sharing all of your insight. This is incredibly important conversation that we're having. I hope we can continue to have this conversation on many platforms and throughout the year. I am so excited to see what you do with Kaleida in 2022, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you. I think what's been great actually is I really appreciate you having me here as well. What's been great is actually having the conversation with these large organizations who say, Jason, we don't, they often say, or has been said, we don't want to need a supply diversity program in 10 years' time. Now think about that vision where your normal is my normal, right? And our normal is normal. And there's no longer a need to actually create opportunity, because there's no more, and look, there'll always be some level of discrimination, right? That's life. We understand that. But imagine that, a place where you no longer have to slice off a piece of the pie for someone, because they all now have a seat at the table and they all feel welcomed and they all know that they can go for it and the best person will win. That's a place where we want to get to. Unfortunately, it will take a few years to get there. But when speaking to these large corporates, that's the vision that they tell me that they want to have in the world, that the world does rid itself of the need to break people down into buckets and and silos.
That's a beautiful vision. And I love that people are making that the end goal, because that should be the end goal. And again, I just appreciate you taking time to share your experience with us, your expertise, and it certainly won't stop here. We'll keep going.
No, thank you very much. Appreciate your time today. Thanks for the conversation. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you all so much for listening. I want to give a big shout out to Jason on this episode to share as openly as he did and speak so confidently on what he believes is exactly what we're going for on this show. And if you enjoyed this one, please pass it on to anyone else that you think would benefit from hearing his perspective. And until next time, remember Jason's lessons on inclusion, and that procurement is for all the people.